Welcome to No Boxes, Just Verses, the podcast where we go beyond the titles, beyond the resumes, beyond the bios, and we explore the lessons of today's most inspiring leaders, all through the songs that have moved them. Each week, we bring you a playlist of a leader's life, 5 songs, 5 lessons, 1 unforgettable conversation.
Let's put the pedal to the metal, let the top lean back. I don't know where we're going, I don't know what we're running to. I'm checking for you, how you feel about that. I think it's time we rendezvous.
Today, I am so honored and pleased to welcome Jack McCullough to No Boxes, Just Verses. Jack, welcome to the podcast.
No, really excited to be here. I was thrilled when you asked me to join. I wasn't really sure that maybe you were thinking of somebody else when you said you were looking for inspiring leaders, but I jumped up on the opportunity and now you're stuck with me.
Listeners do not believe him. I'm going to give you his background, but I've known Jack for years. He's very well known, particularly in the finance and the CFO world, but his influence extends way beyond that. And so we're going to get into this. First, let me just read your bio. Jack is recognized as a financial leadership expert and founder of the CFO Leadership Council, a global network of over 2,500 senior financial executives. He is a former CFO for multiple organizations. He has played a key role in helping CFOs expand their influence beyond finance to become strategic business leaders. Jack has published 3 books, including MBA for Lunch earlier this year. I highly recommend that book, by the way. And he serves as a senior contributor to the Forbes CFO Network. He hosts the Secrets of a Rockstar CFO podcast. And if I can take some liberties here, I highly recommend that podcast, as yours truly has also been a guest on his podcast. And his insights have been featured on the Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg, CNBC, Fox Business Network, and Your World with Neil Cavuto, just to name a few, because you've been even on more than all of that. Jack earned his MBA from the MIT Sloan School of Management, and he's just an all-around awesome dude. I can tell you that firsthand. So many people consider Jack to be not only their mentor, their supporter, and on their personal board of advisors. Jack, welcome to the podcast.
Great to be here. And I want to get whoever wrote my bio on my marketing team. That was wonderful. Maybe when I speak at an event next, you can introduce me.
I would be happy to do it. I mean, especially we've met through your network, CFO Leadership Council. I'm not even sure who recommended me for that council. And there's a lot of professional, in every profession, right? There's a lot of what I call these professional associations, organizations that are meant to bring professionals together to share best practices, help with new jobs, help with hiring, help with thorny situations, all kinds of things. I've been in a lot of them. I have categorically said this to many people, including someone I said it to a couple days ago, Jack. It's that fresh. What you started is more than just that professional network where you kind of pay some dues and you may go to a conference and that's kind of it. It is definitely like for people who operate, especially CFO and finance executives, it is a real go-to resource. People are so open to share their resources, their experiences. You can be guaranteed if you have a question or an issue, there's no judgment in your forum at all, in your network. If I post something like, hey, I'm considering doing this and I'm trying to understand how to talk to my board, I'm trying to understand how to look at these 5 tools, you name it, I'm guaranteed to get within the first, usually hour, but within the first day for sure, at least 10, 15 people responding.
Oh, yeah,
Like
easily.
just hands down, easily. And by day 2 or 3, to be honest with you, sometimes, Jack, it could be overwhelming because so many people have responded. It's just that type of network that you built. So we'll get into it, but I just wanted you to hear how passionate I am about what you have built and how helpful it has been in my career. I wanted you to understand that.
Well, I certainly appreciate it. And when people look back on what they gained from the membership, I hope it's not that they became better at accounting or finance. I hope it's about all the relationships they made, and that they're better strategic thinkers, better leaders, more empathetic leaders because of the council. If somebody says I became better at FASBs, yeah, there's certainly a role for that. I'm not knocking that type of thing, but it's not really what our goals are. They're a little, not even better or worse. They're just different than that.
And there's organizations for that.
Yeah.
To be clear, there are plenty of professional societies for that. This to me is really like the operators community. And what I really love about it, like I said, is there's no judgment. There's no stupid question. Literally, there is literally no stupid question in this forum. People are really respectful. So just had to get that out there before we dive into your story. So Jack, let's get into your journey, your origin story. Who is the young Jack, the kid Jack, the before you went to college Jack? And the song that you picked was really an interesting song. I'd heard it before. I didn't know the name of it, though. So I was glad to have to look that up. It's Won't Get Fooled Again by The Who.
Yes. And I am a baby boomer. So you'll sort of see some baby boomer music through this. But yeah, and I was thinking it was the context of my early life. I was one of those kids. I was, a little bit awkward. It's weird when people from my childhood meet people that only knew me as an adult, because it's sort of like, are we talking about the same Jack McCullough type of thing? But I was just very socially awkward. I was kind of goofy looking, and I was a scrawny kid. And because of that, I got picked on quite a bit. I remember, it probably wasn't as bad at the time as I look back upon it, but I had like headgear for braces, and I just remember kids used to snap it and whatnot. And it was just because I was a wimpy kid. I was an easy target, and I didn't have a lot of friends at that point in my life. But as I got older, things changed a little bit. Like most young children, we kind of outgrew our goofiness a little bit. And I went from weighing probably I was like 6 feet tall when I was in 8th grade, and I weighed about 140 pounds. So I was a tall, skinny kid. And I weighed about 205 pounds by the time I entered college, and I didn't grow an inch. So it was just pure filling out. And I suddenly was no longer the skinny kid that people could pick on anymore. So that's very much shaped who I am, having been picked on. Like my sisters and my friends from back then will say, part of the reason I'm a champion of DEI and women's leadership is I really don't like to see when other people are getting picked on, and I want everybody to have the opportunity to maximize their potential. And, bluntly, when I was a child, maybe those scars are making me a better, or at least more empathetic person today. And it's really such a crucial thing. And I don't look back upon it with sadness or bitterness and anger. It's just one of those things that made me grow. And as my dad taught me, if there's an injustice in the world, you can watch it or you can stop it. And I'd like to be the one who tries to stop it.
Those experiences not only taught you to really advocate for others when you had the ability to do so, right? When you had the microphone, it taught you to do that and stick up for others. I also think it's no surprise that we'll get into later in your journey when you start something like CFO Council. I also think that sense of building community and protection and safe space, I think that comes from your childhood. I really do.
I definitely do. And, it's not all altruistic. A lot of it is safe space for myself, just a community where I can go and like-minded people, and I know I'm going to fit in with financial executives.
Yeah. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Burlington, Massachusetts, which is about 25 minutes north of Boston. If we talk long enough, your listeners will hear my Boston accent.
Proud Bostonian.
Yes.
I totally get that.
Marketing.
Yeah.
So
I spent a couple years in Boston, not enough time to at all get an accent, but I had to understand certain words. It took a minute to understand what people were saying.
Yeah, when the word I can't shake is, the yellow vegetable that comes on a stick?
Corn?
Yeah,
On a
I
stick?
cannot. That's one word. I say corn on the cob.
Oh
And
my gosh. So wait, say that again.
corn on the cob.
Oh my
It's,
gosh.
when I'm just talking naturally, other words do come out with where we drop the
Yeah.
R's. But yeah, for some reason, I cannot get the R to stick with that particular word.
I love that. I love that. So the next phase of your life, like you said, at this point, by the time you got out of high school, you have grown into your size. You wind up going to college. And so kind of walk us through that phase of your journey. Like, how did you pick college? Was that always in the cards for you? Where did you go? Like that early kind of period of your life and then going to that first job. And the song you picked, I mean, and by the way, thank you for actually providing. This is a solid, for rock lovers, this is a solid banger playlist. I can tell you that right now. The next song that you pick is by Metallica, and it's The Unforgiven.
Yeah, and The Unforgiven, it's very introspective, and it's about the songwriter, but as a listener or, reader of the lyrics, he's acknowledging a world. He views himself as very empathetic and sympathetic, but he perceives that he lives in a world where these qualities are viewed as weakness, not strength. And I think he's kind of right. We do live in a world where people think of, if you're a little bit mean, even be cruel, you can get away with it and just be viewed as a strong leader. And the world tends to punish those people who are empathetic and show it. And he was just sort of torn with that. And one of the things I learned during college, and there's an expression, nice guys finish last. And I don't, it certainly shouldn't be true. And maybe in some cases it is, but I began to realize late in my college experience that being nice isn't being weak, that, being niceness isn't a sign of weakness. In fact, just the opposite. Being nice is actually a sign of strength. And that sometimes the strongest person in the room, and I'm not talking the physically strongest, but in terms of character and emotional strength, is the compassionate one, the one that interacts with human decency, treats everybody with respect. People who are a little bit of bullies, yeah, maybe bullies are bigger than stronger than some other people, but emotionally, mentally, psychologically, they're actually the weakest ones in the room, the ones that pick on the little guys. If you weigh 220 pounds and you're picking on a 150-pound person, that doesn't make you strong. That makes you really mentally and emotionally weak, in my view. And I think, the world's a lot more civilized than it was 50 years ago in my childhood. And I think probably most people would agree with that.
And so, because I know that you are what I will call a servant leader, an empathetic leader, you really honed that kind of leadership lesson and skill during this period of your life. So tell us where you went to school and just how that all came about.
Yeah, I went to school. My first year, I studied engineering, and it was one of those things I shouldn't have. I didn't find the topic interesting, but I was one of those students. I did okay in school. When I took the SATs, I had a perfect score on the math test. And
Wow,
but
you're brilliant.
yeah, well, I don't know about that, but I was like above average on English, but I had an 800 on my math SATs. It was to the point my school made me retake it while they watched. I was accused of cheating.
Really?
Yeah, they'd never seen anybody with that type of a spread, and they were theorizing, how could I get it? I retook it. I got like a 780 on the retake. So while they didn't replicate the 800, they knew that I had a couple of good guesses to get me there. But, for that reason, a lot of people encouraged me to go into engineering, believing that I was some sort of math and science prodigy or something, I guess. But it really wasn't for me. It just wasn't my cup of tea. And I didn't particularly do well. And I did well in the math courses, but I didn't really do well in the science courses. So I transferred. I ended up getting a degree in accounting from Suffolk University. And that was a much better fit for my personality and whatnot. And being good at math isn't required for an accountant. Somewhere within my lifetime, they invented those calculator things that came in. But, probably having good math instincts is helpful. But if people are talking and you can kind of figure out that the number close to it is helpful. It's a better thing. The other thing is, like, I'm one of those people, I guess I like things that work. Fundamentally, accounting is a little dull for a lot of people, but what I was drawn to, it works. You can actually get to the right answer. And as I got older, I realized there's more than one right answer. But like in science, you may not get to the right answer. You personally may not be able to solve the problem. And I have tremendous respect for scientists who solve all problems. And, it's just amazing how much they've changed life just since you and I have been alive. But I wasn't that person. Accounting kind of worked for me a little bit.
I always tell people when they're like, oh, what was it like taking the CPA exam versus the bar exam to be a lawyer? I said, the bar exam was actually significantly easier from the CPA exam. I'm like, with the bar exam, 2 plus 2, maybe it's 4, maybe it's not. You've gotta be persuasive, right? But I'm like, for the CPA exam, 2 plus 2 is 4. Like, it's just 4.
Yeah.
And then you tell why it's 4, but it's not like 5. It's not like maybe like 3.578, something blah, blah, blah. Like, it's exact. Like, that's a lot harder in my
Yeah.
opinion. At least for me, that was a lot harder
Yeah, and you're
than
probably right, 'cause people who finish law school, I forget the number, and you'd know more than me, but it's like over 90% of them pass the bar the first time. But the percentage of people who pass the CPA exam the first time, so I don't know what it is today, but I remember in my day, it was
Oh,
like
yeah.
25%. So,
It was really low. It was really low to the point where I remember when I passed all 4 parts in my senior year of college. It was actually a group of us who had been studying together for a year with a professor, Professor Hunt, who made it his mission that these students, we would all pass, which we all did. And I remember I told a family friend who was also a CPA, but had to take it multiple times. I had passed all 4 parts, and kinda like what you said about the SATs, he didn't believe me. He was like, "No, you didn't. You haven't even worked." And I was like,
hey,
"No, I really did."
I took the last part hungover, and I woke up, I was pretty sick. It was the CPA exam was the same week as my final exams in college, my senior year. And
Yeah.
so, like, my final exam, I think the CPA exam was Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, and my finals were Tuesday, Wednesday, and
Oh
Thursday.
my gosh.
And so Thursday night, I went out and I was 22. I don't act like this anymore, but I had way too much to drink. And then I was actually, I felt so bad the next morning. I was like, I can't go. I'm going to throw up in the middle of the exam or something. But then somebody reminded me, I felt like I probably passed a couple of the parts. And back then, if you could pass them, that was great. You could pass it in parts, but you had to get 50% on the parts at least, which doesn't
Mhm.
seem hard, but it was. So they're like, go and get at least get 50%. That way, when you take it in the fall, you only have to take 2 parts, not 4 parts. So, but yeah, how proud my parents were.
Those were some days. I agree, I agree. So at this point, you've made the switch to accounting, which some may say was strange, but it actually makes a ton of sense based off of what you described that you like. And you've done well, like, you're doing well in accounting, and you're like you said, you're actually doing well enough to sit for the CPA exam, so there's the confidence there. What do you think is next at this point? Are you thinking, "I go work in public accounting for a couple years," which is the track a lot of people take, or do you do something different?
I was conventional. I worked for 3 years at KPMG, and I know you worked for you worked there too, right? So,
Yeah, shout
yeah.
out to KPMG.
Yeah, it was Pete, Maurick, and Mitchell at the time, and it was the Big 8,
Uh-huh.
not the Big 4.
Yep.
But yeah, I worked, fairly conventional, had good undergraduate grades, was sitting for the CPA exam. So it was a natural thing to work for a CPA firm. And, I went for one of the big ones. I still recommend it if you're graduating with a business degree and you don't know what you really want to do for your career. And at 22, even if you think you do, you probably don't. Your mind's probably going to change. But it's just a great way. You work with very talented people that are very hardworking who are willing to teach you and make you better. And you'll learn so much in 3 years. And that's basically exactly what I did. Back then, Massachusetts, you had to work 3 years to become a CPA, and that's what I did. In the middle of the 3rd year, I kind of announced in advance once I come up upon my anniversary. And the firm was great. They're very supportive of that. They don't think of it as disloyalty. Not everybody's made for public accounting. Some people, it's highly theoretical. They want to build a company, not audit a company that someone else has built.
Absolutely.
So I worked as a controller for a tech company.
So wait, you leave KPMG
Yes.
and you go into business and industry. You take a job with a company,
Yep. Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
And you get hired to be a controller, which some of the listeners will know, but for others that don't, that's really to be in charge of like accounting
Yes.
at a company and make sure that the books get closed and the financial statements get prepared in accordance with GAAP, generally accepted accounting principles. So you're doing the real traditional thing here at this point in your life.
Yeah, I really am. And, it's interesting because so many of my friends, we had the exact same resume almost. It was a very common thing. And I'm jumping it a little bit, but the first time I became a CFO, I think I was 33, which at the
That's young.
yeah, well, I was born at a good time to become a CFO young because it was just the beginning of the dot-com era.
I see.
And, bluntly, there were a bunch of us who got the role earlier than historically we would have, right? I mean, sure, there's always going to be a prodigy who comes along and does something younger than the rest of us, but that's not me. I almost started singing a Dan Fogerty song, "It Ain't Me, I Ain't No Fortunate Son," but I can't help myself with these 1960s songs. Part of it, there were a bunch of us, it was first time CFOs, 95, 96, 97, 98, but we all had the same resume. Undergraduate accounting, a few years in public accounting, a controllership job, and then we did a CFO job. And, bluntly, a lot of us weren't ready for it, but I think by and large, we did a pretty good job. There were a lot of successful companies, and it wasn't in spite of us. We weren't maybe the main reasons for it, but we did our part. And I'm, proud of what we were able to accomplish at that point in time.
And I definitely want to come back to that because, again, that was the blueprint to being a CFO, especially in the 90s and the early 2000s. That has changed significantly in 2025 and actually in probably the last 10 years. So we'll get into that because you certainly have a lot of experience. You've helped lots of people become CFOs. At this point in your life, you're a controller. It's all kind of working like the textbook way it's supposed to work, if you will. And then you, on the personal side, you fall in love. Again, this is kind of textbook when you think about the years of when, people are in their 20s and they're dating and they're doing this, they're trying to get the career. Then in their early 30s, you get serious and the career's taking off. Then you get serious about somebody, right? And obviously begin to start a family, all those type of things. So you're like bam, 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 bam. And you go to get that graduate degree at MIT Sloan. The song that you pick is Break On Through by The Doors. Again, another classic rock song here. So kind of take us through, everything right now is kind of working, but, life's, right? So it doesn't always work by textbook.
And, Break On Through, it's more the title of the song than the actual lyrics. But when it wasn't well known, or at least I had never heard the expression before. In fact, I never heard of it until a few years ago. But I had what is now commonly referred to as imposter syndrome. And, I think I still have, but less so. I was encouraged, again, I took the GMAT and did really well. And I was encouraged to apply to some elite schools. And I didn't get into all of them by any stretch of the imagination, but I got into a couple of, what by any reasonable definition were elite schools, including MIT Sloan and the University of Michigan and the University of Chicago. And I ended up at Sloan. It was 10 minutes from where I was living at the time.
And no slouch school. It's MIT. I mean, come on.
Exactly. But I maybe hadn't thought of it, but I got there and I found it very intimidating. And no one was anything but nice to me. So it was my problem. Not that it wasn't a different version of being picked on or anything like that. But I'm a kid that had mediocre grades in high school who went to Suffolk University, which is a good institution and I'm proud of it. But back then, nobody outside of Massachusetts had ever really heard of the school. People called it a bit of a safety school. Why the hell did MIT Sloan decide to admit me? I was the first one in the history of my school that was ever admitted there, as a matter of fact. And I'm in class, I'm meeting my classmates for the first time. And, this one's from West Point. This one's from Harvard. This one's from Stanford. This one's from Duke. And I'm from Suffolk University. And it's hysterical because people saying, oh, I never heard of that. Where's that? It's about 4 miles.
Right down the
Sorry,
street.
yeah.
Right there.
But MIT does such a, global community. And I really felt like I was almost in an admissions era. Like I don't belong here. I'm the dumbest person in the class. And again, that's classic imposter syndrome. But then something really happened. And when we spoke, and you liked all of your classmates too, for the most part, but Sloanies are very nice people. And they were curious, not in a mean way. It's not like, why'd you go to, that school? Why didn't you go to Columbia like me? They were just kind of curious about my experience. The other thing is they began to seek out my advice on stuff. And it's like, hey, Jack, you've got the background in accounting and finance. Can you help me work through this problem?
Right.
And initially I was kind of like, why are you asking me? It's 250 smarter people in the room. But then I realized, hey, I'm actually being helpful to this guy who went to Kellogg, or to this woman who went to Stanford, or, whatever it might have been. It's like, I'm holding my own and I actually do belong here. And, I still get it occasionally that the imposter syndrome comes back. Like, the first time the Wall Street Journal ever called, they wanted to get my opinion on something. I just asked why. And I still do. I still get that when I think you mentioned I was on Neil Cavuto and he wanted to talk to me. I'm like, why? Because I'm handsome? Because why would he want my opinion on anything? Why do viewers give a damn what I think? But I had a nice interview, and he's a very nice man, by the way. So,
It's interesting because I think that is super important to share with listeners that from the outside looking in, people will see how much you've accomplished. You have the ear of so many big time leaders in this profession, and they wouldn't believe that there's any self doubt, right? They just wouldn't believe it. But it's important to show that no matter how high you get up, that self doubt for all of us is still there. We use it to fuel us. We do try to use it for good and not to paralyze us, but everyone has it. You're not alone. And so there's somebody out there right now who thinks they're the only person that is struggling with feeling if they belong, if they're an imposter. And it's like, no, you're part of our club. We all feel it. We
yeah,
get past it, but we all feel it.
you're absolutely right. And, hosting the podcast, and I've had the pleasure to interview some of the best CFOs in the game, including you. But when they're candid and they talk about the things they struggled with, one of the great moments for me, and I actually thought it was a prank, but I got an email from somebody in the PR group of AT&T and told me the CFO of AT&T listens to my podcast and wants to appear on it. And I'm like, right. That's kind of like, getting somebody claiming they represent Paul McCartney and, he heard me sing. He wants to do a duet with me or something, right? But, and I'm looking up, I'm like, I'm thinking somebody's playing a joke on me. I'm like, this is a joke. They went to a lot of trouble with this one. And, he's fascinating. He was born in Haiti. He came here unable to speak English. And he learned it from priests and nuns. His family was Catholic. And, the interesting story, and he was so relatable. And, you sometimes, how could I relate to somebody that came here from Haiti and became the CFO of, I think, the sixth or seventh biggest company in the world, right? But it was like, he talked candidly about his struggles. The funniest thing was, though, all of his brothers and sisters, and I think he had 5 of them, they all became like college professors. And I think one was a doctor and 4 were college professors. And he's viewed as the failure of the family. I'm like, you're the CFO of AT&T.
Okay. But in certain cultures, and you know this, in certain cultures, it's like, if you're not a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, what are you doing? You
Yeah.
wasted our time.
Yeah. Like, I'm sorry you disappointed your parents so much that you only became the CFO of the 6th biggest company in the world. So,
Right. I love that. I love that. So MIT is a real unlock for you. It really is, right?
yeah, I mean, it changed how the world perceived me for one thing. Like I got my CFO gig immediately coming out of MIT. And had I not gone there and just continued to work for 2 more years, I don't think I would have gotten it maybe a few years later with progressive career experience. But I went from being that nice, pleasant guy who's kind of funny, who's doing good work as a controller, to going, people see me, boy, this guy's smart and a future leader. Look at him. Look at everything he accomplished as a controller. And then he got his MBA from one of the 2 best schools in Cambridge, as we like to say.
I'm glad. It's interesting you said one of the 2 because I've heard the MIT folks say the best school in Cambridge. So,
Well, my cousin Brian, he got his MBA from Harvard at the same time I was getting my MBA from Sloan. And we're 2 of like 21 first cousins. I think 14 of them are girls and 7 are boys. And if you ask them, they would, to a person, say that Brian and I were the 2 dumbest out of the 21. They were happy for us, don't get me wrong, but they're kind of angry. It's like, it's a man's world. How the hell did these 2 get into MIT and Harvard? What is wrong with the system? They're just walking through. But, they knew me as a child. I was different 26 than when we were taking vacations together as teenagers. So
I love that. I love that. So you get the CFO gig, like things are professionally really working for you on all cylinders. You are a success story. If you go back to your high school, the folks that like made you retake like the SAT, your Suffolk early days, you have made it. You have arrived. But we'll go back to life is lifing. That's my phrase that I like to say. And certainly it applies to my own life. You mentioned that you had gotten married. So you have a younger marriage. and you begin to have a young family, and it takes a turn. The song that you picked, and I'm a big fan of this song as well, Times Like These by the Foo Fighters, is a great song. I'd love for you to share this. I don't know if you've shared this many times publicly. I certainly know this about you. We've talked about it a lot because we share it. But take us through what happens.
Yeah, and you're right. So, Beth and I was achieving some success in my career, and we're both kind of family-oriented people, and we decided to start the family, which we had our struggles with the miscarriage and just, struggle
Yeah.
of getting pregnant, but finally it worked out for us. We had a beautiful son, Devin, and a great kid. Devin is now in his early 20s. He's a young man. He's very severely autistic to this day. He's nonverbal. He still wears diapers, and it's been a struggle. And Devin has a brother named Hunter, and Hunter also is autistic, very different from Devin. Hunter can have conversations, and he likely will have a job when he finishes up his educational process. He's a little bit quirky and whatnot. But so being an autism parent, it's probably the defining fact of my life because it just changes everything. My wife, with two of them, we agreed that my wife had to give up her career and a lot of other things. And, it was okay because you have the responsibility as a parent. Once they're born, as you well know, there's no sacrifice you will not make for your children. But, on the other hand, like there was sadness, but there was also anger added too. And I was raised in a religious family, but, bluntly, I struggle in my relationship with God. There are days that, depending upon the mood you catch me in the day, I might say I'm an atheist. More times I say I'm agnostic. Sometimes I say I'm Catholic. But I felt like, particularly when Hunter, the second one, was born, like someone had stolen something from me, like that God had taken something from me. And again, you can go through life feeling bad for yourself, and you can say it took something from me, and maybe it did, but it transforms you too. I think it probably made me a better human being this way. And therefore, it actually, even though I had to give up aspects of my career, it's part of the reason I'm not a CFO anymore. It was just too stressful a job to be a double autism parent. I think it made me a better leader. It made me a more empathetic leader. It made me a stronger, kinder leader. I'm just a lot more patient than maybe I would otherwise have been. We all have our challenges. It's on us to respond in a way that's constructive for you, constructive for your family. And, I'm in a position as the president of a company, or I was a CFO at the time. I could actually do something constructive in the workplace as well. And, I've been pretty public about being an autism parent for a long time. When a lot of people who were just getting the news, they come to me kind of as in a mentor type of role. It's like, you went through this twice. What do I need to know? How do you prepare for the journey? A lot of times it's the fathers. It's like the main thing. I just want to be a better father and husband. And, often it does fall more on the mother. And I don't mean that in a sexist way. That's just my observation that sometimes these things do fall to the mother more often than the father. You don't want to change your kids, but I really wish that they did have a normal life because, Devin would be out of college now had he followed a similar path. Beth and I both went to college. He'd be early in his career. Hunter would be loving the joys of being a senior in college. And, they never had things like Santa Claus and things like that that other kids get. They never had friendships. They never played sports. And I feel awful that they had that. You don't really want to change your kids. But I'm just committed to making the best experience for them that I possibly can. Try not to be angry. Actually, I've never shared this with anyone, but I used to work in literally anyone. So if Beth is listening, she's going to hear this about me. I shared it with my doctor. I used to work right near, at the time, it was the TD Bank Garden where the Bruins and the Celtics played. And I parked in the garage every day underneath. And one day I saw a guy who was about my age, and he was, I think it was a Celtics game, but he was with his two sons who were about Devin and Hunter's age. And I just went absolutely nuts. I wanted to beat the guy up. What kind of a rational thought is that? Like, who even thinks that? And I didn't. I mean, thinking and wanting to do it is very, very different than doing it. But I actually destroyed the men's room. And men's room have those sort of things. I literally just started kicking it and punching the divider walls down I just went nuts. It was only 45 seconds, but it was like, the reason I told my doctor is, do I have anger management issues? It's like, my doctor's been my doctor since my late teen years. And he's like, good God. And he knows me pretty well, and I'm very candid, but he's like, yeah, you've got to get that under control. I mean, but the guy didn't do anything other than the sin he did was walking with his sons in front of me. And I was jealous and outraged that he had everything that I wanted. I would love to have been able to take my kids to a sporting event, but I couldn't. So the song that I picked, Times Like These by the Foons Fighters, it's about learning to live, learning to give, learning to love during times of adversity. That one incident aside has made me a better person.
What you're talking about is going to help so many people because there's a lot of people out there who, again, are suffering in silence, trying to carry it all and do the brave face. I mean, I share this all the time. You go through ups and downs. This is real life. There's a grieving period. There really is. I don't want this to sound bad because you haven't lost your child hasn't died. But if we're being real, we've had these dreams for these kids when they were in the womb. We have put a picture of their life and what we expect it to be before they can even walk. And let's just be real. When we realize that can never happen in that way, maybe in a different way, but not in that way, it is pretty natural to feel like you've had a loss or almost a death. It is a death of a dream. I'll put it to you that way. It is absolutely. And that is devastating. It makes you angry. It makes you sad. I mean, that's just being real.
Yeah. I mean, if I didn't share those emotions, I'd have to be like a sociopath or something like that, right? I mean, it's natural. Destroying a bathroom in the Boston Garden, as the locals call it, the garden, not my finest moment. And I won't even attempt to justify it or anything like that because there is no justification for what I did. But it was probably, 10 or 12 years of just repressing it. And guys are kind of told to do that, that again,
right.
Society's wrong in saying the strong guys repress their emotions and whatnot, but it is kind of an expectation, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Don't get help. Don't get therapy. Bottle it up. You've got this. You're tough. And you and I talked about this in the prep. I do think that attributes or contributes at least to why the divorce rate for parents of autistic children is higher than the average divorce rate of just couples, period. And we're both still married to our spouses.
Yeah.
Not because I'm patting ourselves on the back, because just like you, I'm sure we've struggled. It has not all been easy by any stretch of the imagination, but getting through this with my partner, and you've gotten through it with Beth, is probably one of the best things that has happened in my life.
Yeah, and it's truly a partnership between the two of you. And I don't know your husband, but I know about him. He was Navy.
He was.
Yeah. So, and I this is a physically big, strong guy in the Navy. He's probably been schooled similar to the way I was, that if you've got a problem, keep it to yourself, figure it out, do the work. Nobody wants to hear about it. And good for him that he's recognizing the stupidity in that mindset, which doesn't mean he can't be a big, strong, tough man. I'm absolutely certain that he is. So he wouldn't.
And in fact, it's interesting. When we first decided to get the diagnosis for our son, it took us, someone said something to us about it. It was a daycare provider was like, you need to get your son tested. My first reaction was, she was an idiot. We need to take our kid out of that daycare. Like, I wanted to tell her off. And my husband was like, okay, yeah, I could see that. Like, he kind of accepted it like right away. I was actually the one who was like, I don't accept that. I don't accept it. I want 3 or 4 opinions. I refuse to believe that my child is autistic. And my husband was like, he's autistic. Let's just go get him help. And so that was actually the roles that we played. Now, obviously, after going to several doctors, it was just painfully obvious that he was autistic, and I accepted it. And then I was like, move out of the way because I'm about to solve this issue for him, which, that's my nature. But Bill was he'd accepted it very quickly and was really on board with trying to figure out how we could help our child. And it actually took me a minute to get on board.
Yeah, it is interesting because we had a similar type of thing where I mentioned my suspicions to Beth and immediately dismissed it. It's like, no, children learn at their own pace. He's a perfectly normal child. And, her mother was sort of the same way because it was like, her mother's like, no, he's not, just you're impatient. And I get it, but, it's like my sisters would see him and, they would kind of quietly say to me, have you considered this possibility? It's a kick in the head. No one wants to hear that their child is that way. On the other hand, he's living a wonderful life. It's not the life that I envisioned, but my thing is I want to make sure my kids are safe and happy and well protected.
Well, thank you for sharing that. It hasn't all been easy. So you're dealing with this stuff, like you said, personally. Your wife has decided to take care of the boys full time. You're still working, but you're supporting. But at some point, you do leave your CFO job and you go to start something called CFO Leadership Council. A, was it always called that? B, what made you decide to go do that? And then we can get into where you are now and why. I'm so glad you did.
Yeah, and there's a couple of steps in that. I was a CFO, I was a part-time CFO when I started it, and I wanted to have a peer network. And there's another organization, FEI, great
I was gonna say,
organization.
these things existed, so when you say you wanted to have a peer network, tell me more because organizations have existed before you.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're a great organization. I'm not going to slam them at all because I have a lot of friends who are there and I see the good work they do. I applied to join them and they turned me down. And I wasn't trying to sneak in. Yeah, and I had a lot of friends who are in FAI. What do you mean they turned you down? It's like you must have angered somebody. It's like you're a CFO. I'm probably like the only one in the history of the organization that they turned down. Someone must not have liked me and said, don't let this guy in. But, that said, there were things they were doing that I thought the focus should be more on the CFOs. And the other thing is, back then, you could attend the meetings, but to join FEI, you had to be a public company CFO, and I wasn't. So that was perhaps, at least technically, perhaps that was the reason that they turned me down. I don't know. But, so if you're familiar with the expression, if you can't beat them, join them. I flipped it. If you can't join them, beat them. So I decided I'm going to start my own group if they won't let me in. And I don't think very many of them know it, but the few who do probably wish they'd admitted me back in the day because the CFO Leadership Council, I wouldn't have needed to start it. But, I would have been a good and very happy and active member of FEI. I probably would have been the Boston chapter president once or twice along the way. But the original name was the CFO Roundtable. We changed that because as we started going into other cities, every city had a sort of an informal group called the CFO Roundtable. And I'm like, hey, I'm an accountant. I don't get paid for coming up with original names. But we wanted to focus on, we're not going to make you a better accountant. We're going to make you a better leader and strategic thinker. And we wanted something that was gender neutral. And we came up with the CFO Leadership Council. And, I think it's a good name.
Okay, so you do these CFO roundtables. You start one in Boston. So is this just kind of one of those things where you're like, I know these 5 people. Hey, friend, hey, friend, hey, friend, come meet me at this hotel or this conference room. And we're going to start this. Does it just kind of start like that? And then people are like, hey, this is a good idea. And then I'm going to introduce you to my friend in Los Angeles or New York. Is that how it happens? Just that organically?
Yeah, it's that simple. And yeah, back then it was phone calls. But what was interesting is there was no money involved. So I tried to find a free space. So MIT hooked me up with a free space and free parking on campus and stuff like that, which parking in Cambridge, Mass, big bucks. Not New York or San Francisco, but big bucks nonetheless. We had the first meeting and I was expecting maybe 10 or 12 would come, but we ended up at 46. And I didn't know if I was going to do it as a one-off, but people were like, this is great. And I did it for a couple of years, but it began to take up too much of my time because at the time I had a full-time job as a CFO. And sort of running what was becoming an organization that was meeting 4, 6, 8 times a year. It was just too much time for what I was getting out of it. So I actually announced that I was going to shut it down. And a lot of people came to me and said, you can't. I'm like, well, actually I can. And they were like, what can we do to make you not do it? Because we really like what you're building here. And so we agreed to charge dues. It wasn't a lot of money. But that enabled me to not have to pay for the cost of the food out of my own pocket. And I hired an admin person to do the marketing and the operations and whatnot. And I knew exactly what I wanted. I wanted a mom, a young mom that wanted part-time work that they could do mostly from home. Person I hired, she eventually became the president of the group. And she ended up working for us for 10 years, Becky. And, but I said, look, you only need to leave the house once a month, but when you do have to leave the month, you have to have something close to 100% perfect attendance. Those 8 or 10 times a year, you can't go 6 for 10. You've got to go 10 for 10 or 9 for 10. And it was perfect. And at that point, I was working at KPMG, so I couldn't take any money from it. So I just, whatever money we took in, I gave to her. She made like 70 grand the first year. And it's like,
Wow.
gee, that ain't bad for, back then there weren't a ton of work from home jobs.
Right.
You could work 12 hours a month and make that kind of dough. So she kind of is the one that got it going.
Wow. I love how this organically worked, but also I believe that it wasn't just organic. You had already been developing relationships. You're a humble guy. You believe in servant leadership. Even just the conversation about, well, I wanted to make sure that I helped a single mom or a mom that was working from home or something. Like even like you were intentional about that. It doesn't surprise me that you hit the market at the right time where lots of us were looking for that network. Because again, there's lots of association places that exist, but they were not as focused on the office of the CFO and not the operating CFO, not just like the accounting societies. I love the accounting societies, do not get me wrong, very involved, but it's a different focus. This was like when I remember joining, I remember having somebody call me and tell me about this. And I joined the group, and you had to have a listserv or Google Groups or whatever you want to call it, but you have a way for us to talk to each other. And I started getting the emails. I was like, oh my God, I had that same question. I found a colleague because it's lonely being the CFO because you're supposed to have all the answers and you don't.
Yeah. When you're the CFO, you can't exactly go to your boss and say, I don't understand this. Can you help me figure it out? I mean, depending upon what it is, that wouldn't be looked upon too favorably necessarily. And, that's kind of what it was all about. The community is just amazing. I've shared with you CFO Brew. They cover all of the CFO conferences, including ours. And their observation at our event was we set the record for the most hugs at a financial conference. It's become such a tight-knit community. And like I found out, in fact, it started at the event that you were the keynote speaker at our first ever conference that wasn't in Boston. It was in Phoenix. It started out at that conference. We do have a large number of women in our community. We recently passed 1,000. So it's about 40%. And they started their own WhatsApp group. They really ended up liking each other, and they wanted to be able to keep in touch with each other informally throughout the course of the year. And earlier you used the word personal advisory board. That's what they call their own group. It's their personal advisory board. It's all other women leaders that they met at our conferences. And there are some people who could say, oh, that's awful. They're doing something out of us. But I think it's wonderful that they're making so many great relationships at our events and through CFO Connect and whatnot that they want to keep in touch outside of them. I think it's the coolest thing ever.
And again, this has been the thread of your story throughout. You're always trying to support and have these relationships just happen and do whatever you can. And it's not about the accolades for you and that type. You just want people to find their community just like you did.
Yeah.
And so again, I think this still always goes back to how your leadership and your lessons started, if you will.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's just the perspectives are so different too in our community, right? I've shared with you, I grew up Irish Catholic in Boston. It was a pretty easy thing to be Irish Catholic in Boston in the 1970s and 1980s, but I love the diversity of the community, and I love the fact that they all support each other, and yet we recognize that the differences are what make us stronger.
Well, let's get to where you are today. Let's wrap this up. I'd love to understand where you are now in your career, what makes you happy, what's going on now. The song that you picked for this phase of your life is Turn the Page by Bob Seger.
Yeah, I couldn't pick all metal songs, so it's a great song. Highly recommended. Seeger's one of those artists like Billy Joel that kind of everybody likes, right? Everybody likes Billy Joel. But, I'm at the stage of my career, and I sold the company 4 years ago. I'm spending a lot of time with the members. And I now have a 4-decade career. And what's the expression? I know a thing or two about a thing or two. So a lot of the time I spend is mentoring our members, passing on the wisdom. And again, I'm not passing on my finance and accounting aptitude, which, isn't all that much anymore. But in terms of managing their career, managing different expectations, working with different people, building a team, how do I bring Gen AI into the company when the team sees it as a threat to their jobs? things like that. I formally and informally mentor a lot of people. I'm particularly proud that a lot of women have reached out to me as a mentor. And it does make some sense, particularly, women of color have reached out, and ideally they'd like to, have a senior woman of color as their mentor. And I get that. But, you're looking at the demographics of people who were CFOs in the 1980s and the 1990s. There just weren't that many of them. There are a lot of them now. And when they get along and they get some battle scars, they're going to be wonderful mentors for the next generation. But right now, I'm kind of filling that gap as best I can. There are certain experiences I certainly can't relate to at all, but there's some I can. But I just want to give their perspective. I like to use the expression helping the next generation of financial leaders. One thing with the podcast that we learned is my typical listener is in their late 30s or early 40s. They're often a first-time CFO or pre-CFO. And I think that's just absolutely fantastic.
And being a CFO has changed so much because, it used to be the pathway. You went to public accounting, then you went into corporations, business industry, when you were a controller, then you became a CFO. And now, a lot of times, folks aren't accountants at all.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm sure you have more of the stats on that. A lot of people come up through finance, iBanking, you name it. What they focus on more is what you're doing, is the storytelling, the leadership, the soft skills. You're seeing that's what's making people CFOs. It's not just the technical skills. In fact, I think the technical skills are just assumed. And you don't even have to be an accountant to be a CFO at all. You have to have a good controller, though.
Yeah.
All good CFOs who don't have that background have great controllers. Let's just keep that clear. But it's just a different focus. And what you're talking about, you actually don't learn in school. That's why you need these type of communities, because you don't get taught that.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And another area where I've met a lot of people since doing the podcast, a lot of former engineers are CFOs. And, the CFOs today, fundamentally, they're problem solvers. I like to say CFOs no longer report history, they make history. But who's better at solving a problem than an engineer? That's how they're trained. That's their aptitude. So it's a very natural thing. Plus the data and the quantitative stuff comes easier to them than to anyone else too. But yeah, you're right. I mean, it's not so much where you went to school or what you studied or even what you've done. It's what you can bring to the organization in this capacity. There are situations where the classic CPA, accounting manager, controller, that's the CFO for this company, but it's the exact wrong profile for a different company. It's a matter of finding out if you want to do it, finding the company that needs the problem solver, that needs the team builder, that needs the gatekeeper, that needs the strategic partner to the CEO. They're all CFOs, but there's so many different kinds of CFOs.
But what they all are leaders.
Yes.
And that is exactly what you are focusing on, is empowering the future of leaders. And I thank you for doing that and really dedicating this phase of your life to doing that for so many folks, because that's what's going to make the difference.
Well,
for sure.
Leadership's our middle name, right?
Yeah, that's for sure. Well, listen, we have had so much fun getting to know more about your journey, your career, and your playlist. Before we get out of here, I always like to ask my guests, how can we follow you? How can we support you? And then I ask for one song that you haven't named that just makes you happy. You hear it, you're walking on the street, and you smile.
I'm on X. I almost said I'm on Twitter, but I haven't really been active since Breaking Bad went off the air a few years ago. So your best bet is to follow me on LinkedIn. It's simply Jack McCullough, CFO, without any spaces or anything else. And a song that makes me happy, I'm probably going to surprise you since you are aware of my taste in music. And you probably do know this song, but Goody Two Shoes by Adam Ant. Do you know the song?
I do. Wow.
It's about apparently he's a very clean living guy and people find that a little bit odd in him and he does his own thing, but it's also like a very catchy, upbeat, happy type of song,
Right.
We don't follow fashion, that'd be a joke. So, but it's a song I can relate to and I just love the beat. I don't know one other song by Adam Ant other than that one, but I love it. You'd think I would explore and try to see if other music of his I love. So
what I love about doing these podcasts is, again, like, you can't judge a book by its cover. You can't look at somebody and say, this is the type of songs that they would like. I will tell you, having done many of these interviews, I'm always surprised by somebody's 1 or 2 song choices every time.
Yeah.
And this is no exception because I would not have picked that song for you at all. But I'm here for it and I like it, and it's going to be a part of your playlist. Listen, Jack, I've had so much fun doing this chat with you. Thank you for your time. Can you hold up your little incredible twin statue?
Oh,
So those of you watching this on video can see, look at this. This is his little twin. I love him. I love
and
him.
look at the
That is
abs.
amazing. Look at that. I mean, because it's true, because you have abs
Yeah,
like that, I'm sure.
right.
But listen, we got to get out of here. Thank you for sharing your lessons. I'm going to recap your amazing playlist. And your Rock It Out playlist, really, at the end of the day. First, you picked Won't Get Fooled Again by The Who. Next up, The Unforgiven by Metallica. Followed by Break On Through by The Doors. Fourth, we have Times Like These by the Foo Fighters. Followed by Turn the Page by Bob Seger. And the bonus song, Goody Two Shoes by Adam Ant. Jack, it has been fun. It has been a pleasure. Listeners will be following you and cheering you on. Thank you for what you're doing to build the next generation of finance leaders and leaders in general. Jack, thank you for being on No Boxes, Just Verses.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. You know, I always love getting together with you. It's too bad we live on opposite coasts, but this was a lot of fun. And as I mentioned, this is probably the most introspective interview I've ever had. And I'm just grateful for the opportunity to share a little about my personal background with your listeners.
And that's a wrap. Thank you so much for listening to No Boxes, Just Verses. And if this episode moved y'all, please share it, rate us, follow the show on your favorite platform, and we can keep building our leadership playlists together. So you can find me, guys, on Instagram as Shannon Nash 1 and No Boxes, Just Verses on Instagram. You can also find me on LinkedIn as Shannon Nash ESQ CPA. You can also find No Boxes, Just Verses on LinkedIn. You can visit our website at noboxesjustverses.com. Finally, don't forget to check out the show notes. The show notes are super important because this is where the playlists will live. You will be able to get these playlists on Apple and Spotify. You'll also be able to follow up and see how to reach out to the guests, follow them, and support them. Until next time, I need you to stay unboxed. You come for the stories, but you stay for the playlists. I'm Shannon Nash, and I'm out.